All right. I think we're live. Push one in the chat if you can hear me. All right, got a confirmation. Thank you for the confirmation. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 879, Black Politics. Please hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible, hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust. There's a link in the chat pinned to the top, so if you want to join, make sure you click on the Zoom link and update your Zoom client before joining because it just works better that way. All right, let me share my screen and get started with this. I wanted to discuss this conservative view that is trending right now about Donald Trump being the front runner of the party and the party itself. And so a lot of the talking points that you hear from the Black Brain Trust are now being echoed and reverberated in other media sections of the media now. And so I want to cover this so that we actually have some understanding and consensus that we have not been all that wrong in what we have been saying, okay? In fact, we've been more right than we've been wrong, regardless of what the pundits in the space want to say. So let me get started on this real quickly. Let me share my screen and then push one in the chat if you can see my screen. All right, got a confirmation from the chat. So let me get started with this. This is from PBS. This was done actually Friday night after we had already done our stream on Thursday, our analysis on 2028. If you haven't checked that out, make sure you go back and check out the stream that we did on Thursday about the future of the Democratic Party for 2028 candidates lined up. So we did an analysis on that. Let me get started playing this, and then we'll get into some questions and analysis on this.
What Trump 2.0 would mean for America and American democracy. A special episode with a student audience this week on Firing Line.
For those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution. I am your retribution.
Republicans today remain split, though unevenly, on their support for Donald Trump.
I support him because Joe Biden's a disaster.
I'm not going to support Donald Trump for president.
Under any circumstances. No.
You would still vote for Trump under that circumstance?
Because Biden is awful.
The issue this election cycle is making sure the Putin wing of the Republican Party does not take over the West Wing of the White House.
Firing Line has come to Hofstra University to delve into the implications of another Trump presidency with two conservative guests, both co-authors of public policy papers holding contrasting perspectives. Mike Gonzalez, a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation, says a Trump win would bring forth a revival of effective conservative policies.
The Trump years, we had a great economy, very low inflation. We had a tax cut that worked.
Amanda Carpenter, a former aide to Senator Ted Cruz, argues that Trump poses an existential threat to American democracy.
The way that he has changed the Republican Party to have a broad, unconstrained view of power that puts Donald Trump above the law is really what worries me long term.
A special forum at Hofstra University this week on Firing Line.
Firing Line with Margaret Hoover is made possible in part by Robert Granieri, Vanessa and Henry Cornell, the Fairweather Foundation, the Tepper Foundation, Peter and Mary Calico, the Asness Family Foundation, the Beth and Ravenel Curry Foundation, Pfizer, Inc.
Amanda Carpenter, Mike Gonzalez, welcome to Firing Line. We're here at Hofstra University in front of a studio audience of students. And we're here to discuss what a second term with Donald Trump as president could mean to American democracy and to the American conservative movement. You both have a history in Republican politics. Amanda, you previously worked for Senator Ted Cruz of Texas and Senator Jim DeMint of South Carolina, who at one time was also the president of the Heritage Foundation, a nonpartisan conservative think tank that you, Mike Gonzalez, work for now. You're both former journalists. Mike, you worked in George W. Bush's administration. Today, you find yourselves on different sides of the question about what former President Trump has done, both to the country and to the GOP. For both of you, I'd like to know, has Donald Trump changed the Republican Party for better or for worse? Mike.
Yes, it's changed it, I think, for the better. But first, I should say that I'm speaking in my own capacity, that I'm speaking for Heritage, nor for the Washington Examiner, for which I'm a weekly columnist, nor for Encounter, my publisher, not even for the Gonzalez family. All five of us have different views. I'm here speaking my mind.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is a very different party today than it was, 10 years ago. It's more attuned to the demands, the angsts, the worries of the people. There's a long answer to this of the Democratic Party, of the left in general, abandoning the working class. Mm-hmm. And now the chickens have come home to roost, and the people, the everyday Americans, they have worries and wants that are different from those of the Northeastern elite, the coastal elites, and I think Donald Trump has changed the Republican Party to be more responsive to that.
Amanda, has Donald Trump changed the Republican Party for the better or for worse?
I mean, from my point of view, there's no question he'd change it for the worse. And even just looking at the plain politics of the lack of success the Republican Party has had, I mean, he won by a very slim margin in 2016, losses in 2018 midterms, loss in 2020, and losses in the 22 midterms. But, I don't like to just focus on the politics because I don't believe you should just do what will lead you to win. The way that he has changed the Republican Party to have a broad, unconstrained view of power that puts Donald Trump above the law is really what worries me long term. The way I see the 2024 election, this really isn't a question of Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. It's a question that we have really grappled with throughout Donald Trump's presidency of how we hold the president accountable. The second term of Donald Trump, it won't be like the first term because he knows how to use the levers of power the second time. The things that he is promising on the campaign trail, saying, I will investigate my enemies, I will go after people I don't like. He has an apparatus around him where they've thought about how to make his rhetoric into a reality. The second time it will happen because he's committed to surrounding himself with loyalists who are committed to him and not the fundamental principles of the rule of law.
74 million people voted for Donald Trump in 2020. When they voted for him last time, January 6th hadn't happened. There hadn't been violence in the Capitol. So I think the question Republicans who voted for him last time will be asking themselves is, I might be uncomfortable with Trump, but is he still better than Biden? And this is what I want to get at. Let me play this video for you first. Take a look.
We will treat those people from January 6th fairly. We will treat them fairly. And if it requires pardons, we will give them pardons. I am your warrior. I am your justice. And for those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution. I am your retribution. Not to the left. We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country. He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one.
Mike, how will you persuade Republicans who have some hesitations about Donald Trump especially in response to some of the clips that they've heard, to support him?
Well, it's not my job to do that. I'm not here defending the candidate, nor his personality, nor the fact that he is, he's more personal than I would like, or none of that. I'm here discussing his policies, and I think you touched on a good point. It's Trump versus Biden. And I think you have to look at what a Trump 2.0 and a Biden 2.0 would be. And we have to be frank with each other. We have a government report that now says that the president has diminished faculties. Recently, ABC News had a poll. You know how many people think he's too old to run for president? 86%.
But let's stick with
that's not what she asked you, right? She asked you a very specific question. And this is the sort of response that you get from people on that side of the fence, that somehow, in order to talk about Trump, you must talk about Biden. I'm not a Biden advocate, but the question was very simple. Let me finish playing this.
No, right. Okay, fine. I'm very happy to do that. The policies have been awful. The policies, the border has been open. The foreign policy, the world is on fire. We have two hot wars, one about to maybe start between China and Taiwan. Domestic policy was also very bad. We have inflation, such as we haven't had in decades. And look at the Trump years. The Trump years, whatever his rhetoric was, we had a great economy, very low inflation.
You inherited a good economy from Obama, okay? That needs to be understood first and foremost. 2017, in January 2017, Obama handed a good economy to Trump. 2018, he starts reversing Obama's policies. Keep that in mind.
Tax cut that worked. We had peace in the world. Americans were not under threat. I think that on the basis of this, we can discuss the policies of Trump in the first 3 years and the policies of Biden in the first 3 years. And I think that's a very easy debate to have.
Okay. Amanda, you work for an organization called Protect Democracy, which has recently published a paper called The Authoritarian Playbook 2025. And it details how specifically a second Trump administration could dismantle democracy. Many on the right have dismissed this as alarmism. Mm-hmm. Why are you so concerned that a second Trump term would be different than the first?
Sure. Let's start with the idea, because this is a popular one you come across a lot, that you can separate Donald Trump's rhetoric and have a debate about the policies. And I sort of reject that outhand, because what Donald Trump is proposing is remaking the government in a different way so that you can't have a legitimate policy debate. I mean, we're not talking about policy preferences. When Donald Trump says, I have the Article 2 power to do whatever I want, you're talking about a different view of executive power. So you look at his other promises that you pointed out in that video reel, where he's talking about giving pardons to January 6 rioters. This is one, big red flag area. If he is elected president and does that, that effectively amounts to a license for political violence that he approves of. And so who's going to stop him? We keep saying, there's this other popular idea that the institutions are strong enough to hold President Trump. Well, not if Congress won't hold him accountable, not if he doesn't respect judicial rulings, like he didn't respect any of the judicial rulings that said there was no widespread fraud in the 2020 election. He continues to promote the lie that the election was stolen. And so I ask, what will constrain him in a second Trump term if none of those guardrails are present? And let me tell you what, this is the authoritarian endgame. This is what happens in all authoritarian regimes. They consolidate all this executive power, and then guess what? You can't give it up. Because if your political adversaries ever get it, they might hold you accountable. And then they stay in power and they never get out.
Mike, you're of Cuban descent. You have spent much of
Keep in mind, she's a conservative, okay? She's an actual conservative. Just keep that in mind. That critique came from a conservative.
Your career actually focused on authoritarianism abroad. You are one of the authors of the Mandate for Leadership 2025, this 900-page guidebook that articulates the policies of a next conservative president. Now, I should say the Heritage Foundation is a nonprofit conservative think tank and will not be endorsing any candidate in the presidential race.
These are political ideas that we would love for President Biden to take up. for any president, the next president, this president, to take up.
And you do it every 4 years.
Yeah.
Mandate for leadership delineates many areas of the federal government that would be overhauled and reformed in a second Trump administration. Why do you believe such dramatic action is needed?
We need to return power to the people. There is no fourth branch of government in the Constitution. Right now, we have a permanent bureaucracy that is 2.4 million strong. People who are in the permanent bureaucracy should not be in policymaking. So I am very strongly of the belief that we have to get that under control. That is not authoritarian, Amanda. And it's very rich for that side to say, we're standing up for democracy. The weaponization of the DOJ, you talk about political violence. What were you in all of 2020? We had political violence for months. We had 12,000 demonstrations.
You're referring to the summer
the BLM riots of 2020.
Yes, Black Lives Matter, the summer of 2020, where George Floyd was murdered.
That was really political. That was more of an insurrection. In the years.
Keep in mind, this guy is trying to compare Black people in the streets protesting the injustice that happened to George Floyd by Derek Chauvin as the same as January 6th. Keep that in mind. This is the level of thought that goes on that side. No question or even mention about George Floyd and what happened to George Floyd. It was just that there was political violence, from that side, not from right wingers and taking over the state capitol in Michigan, not from the Oath Keepers or the 3%ers or the 5%ers or any of these other Patriot Front groups and whatnot. These QRFs, quick reactionary forces that has been designated by the federal government and other non-policy think tanks as domestic terrorist organizations. Nothing to say about that, though. All this happened under Trump.
Overthrowing the federal government.
They were actually
violent action because when I look at January 6th, I see concentrated action to stop the peaceful transfer of power and deny Biden's presidency.
I'm going to take control of this because I don't want to compare this to BLM. Here's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about, is a second Trump administration going to be a reinvigoration of American conservatism and an opportunity to really install policies that can help define a new generation of conservatives? Or is it going to undermine the institutions of our democracy? So I want to stay on a couple of just examples. Amanda, you write about how Trump plans to use the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to remove non-citizens en masse without due process. Why is this of concern if he returns to office?
Well, foundationally, it's a concern because you're invoking warlike measures to exercise what is within the purview of federal and congressional immigration policy. And so why are we going to warlike measures rather than working with the existing structures? But first, I just want to rewind the tape back just a little bit, because the thing that underscores Donald Trump's new ethos for a second Trump term is just the idea is that he was stopped by the deep state, sabotaged by the deep state in his first term. And I actually don't think that's true. If you look at the big areas where his policies were stopped, it were by high-ranking conservative officials of his own appointment. I mean, if you want to talk about immigration policy, he went to his advisors and said things like, well, can't we just shoot them? And his advisor says, no, you can't, sir. They opposed him on that policy.
Keep in mind, the people he wanted to shoot were Black people, okay? He specifically wanted to shoot Black people who were out there in the streets, especially the ones who were marching in Washington, D.C. In November of 2020.
Not only was it just wrong, morally wrong to do, but it is outside the law. Right. And so now, going to a second Trump administration, they have people developing a framework so that you can do things like sweep people up using these warlike measures. They talk about how immigration is now an invasion at the border. That is all being used to trigger these Alien Enemies Act so that they can take these military-like operations, which I think is not something that is within unilateral executive power.
Mike, how do you respond to Amanda's concerns of overreach by federal law enforcement with respect to deportations and immigration?
Between 8 million and 10 million people, we don't know how many have come in the past 3 years. The border is open. the parole, people are being paroled, and even Alejandro Mayorkas has said that 85% of people who come in and ask for asylum are allowed in. You know, we don't know what we're going to do with the population that has come in.
But with respect to
10 million
the
people is
concern,
bigger than 35 states.
No. There's no question there is a crisis on the border. This
Right.
program has covered it. You have talked about it. You have both talked about it. We all agree there is a crisis on the border. But in terms of how to use the power of the executive to combat that crisis at the border, how do you respond to accusations that Trump would push the limits of executive power in order to deal with the border crisis?
I think the first thing he would do is close the border the way he did for during his administration. I think that the border will go back to what we had, hopefully, and then we have to. What do we do with that population of 10 million people who have come in, who have been paroled in? The definition of parole has been expanded. It was very limited.
And they controlled the White House, they controlled the Senate, and for the most part, and they controlled the lower house in Congress. What possible justification could they have for not coming up with an actual policy to control the border? There were no Democrats in their way. All of this was in their laps. Okay, they had full control over this, and they did nothing from a policy perspective.
And then it was expanded enormously by the Biden administration to the point that we have 8 or 10 million people who have come in.
I absolutely agree with that. Amanda, do you understand the point he's making about the expansion of humanitarian parole in a way that hasn't actually reflected congressional action?
Yeah,
you understand
and I think it would be wonderful if Congress actually did assert itself and start making some border policy. I mean, there was a deal on the table now, which I think was actually possibility for a big conservative victory. So you would have got a shutdown at the border if it exceeded a certain cap. And so, but this is where I get into 5,000.
So guys,
but then this is where it gets into trouble. We're always looking to the president to just do everything. And I think a lot of Republicans in Congress stood down because they have this idea that if we just let Trump, we're just going to give him all the power.
Well, actually, what
everything.
happened is conservatives negotiated this bill, and then Donald Trump said he wasn't for it, and then it collapsed in 24 hours.
Well, Republicans did, but
again,
but hold on, guys. I want to.
Conservatives had agreed on the bill. Okay, Biden's the left wing of the party, Biden, the administration proposed a bill. Republicans agreed on it, and then they balked out at the last hour. Why did they balk out? Like she just said, Trump called and basically told them to balk on the deal. Okay, there was a bill on the table. This idea that, well, Democrats aren't doing anything. Democrats did do something. Okay, the administration did do something, but you had folks who were standing in the way that said, no, don't agree on any deal to begin with. That's where we're at right now. So that's why you have this crisis, if it is a crisis to begin with.
We're going in circles here. Mike, I just want to give you one more chance to respond to President Trump's rhetoric about the overreach of the executive branch when it comes to dealing with the immigration crisis in a second administration.
But that didn't happen in the first administration.
So you're saying because it didn't happen in the first administration?
It didn't happen in the first one.
Okay.
We had a border that was not hermetically closed, but was reasonably closed. We didn't have the chaos we have today.
But how do you respond to the concerns he has raised about using federal forces to implement these mass deportations?
I don't know what they're going to do, but we have a big problem. Let's go back to closing the border the way Trump did during his 4 years in office. We had a border that was...
Are you confident he will do it completely legally within his executive authority, legal executive authority?
Well, that's the way he did it in his first 4 years.
But I haven't heard you respond to the concern Amanda has raised. Is it just because you don't have a concern?
We have a crisis of a
But does
border.
that justify extra legal actions?
I'm not sure that to be honest, I don't know what he's promised to do, but I know that what we have right now is a chaotic border. This is a big crisis for the Biden administration, and they're realizing it finally.
Yeah, all of that is true. I think the question still is about whether Trump will be true to his word and implement the largest mass deportation operation in history using arcane laws from the founding of the country to remove non-citizens en masse without due process. And I'm not sure that we got to a place of understanding on that, but I want to move on to the Department of Justice. Project 2025 calls for re-examining the norms that since Watergate have really surrounded the interaction between the White House and the Justice Department. Amanda, why is the Heritage Foundation's vision for the DOJ's new relationship with the White House troublesome to you?
Well, I would say since the post-Nixon era, there has been this idea that the Department of Justice should operate with some degree of independence. And there is growing conservative thought on the Trump supporting side that this isn't true. We don't need independent agencies. And when you see Donald Trump, he is constantly threatening investigations into his enemies, media outlets, journalists, accusing people who work for him that happen to oppose him of things like treason. And so in the past, if you look at what happened in the 2020 election, there was that huge standoff at the Department of Justice in December 2020 when he was leaning on prosecutors to say, go investigate these conspiracy theories about election fraud. This is another case where he was constrained by conservative lawyers in the Justice Department. They said, no, there's nothing to investigate here. We're not going to.
Remember Bill Barr?
threatened.
Remember him close to Trump, told Trump you're crazy for doing what you're doing? Remember that? And then Bill Barr ends up leaving. Remember that? Keep that in mind.
To resign en masse. His handpicked Attorney General, Bill Barr, quit. So this is another case where this wasn't the deep state sabotaging Donald Trump. These were people committed to the rule of law who wouldn't do his dirty work. And so in the second Trump administration, a bunch of people have gotten together and say, well, how do we eliminate that? How do we find people who will go along, who are okay with the idea of a president interfering in political investigation? And you see him like every time he makes a speech, essentially saying, this is what I'm going to do. I believe him. I don't dismiss that rhetoric.
Mike, can you respond to Amanda's point about the fact that the real resistance in Trump's first term wasn't from a deep state so much as from prominent conservatives in prominent positions in his own administration who drew the line and said no, like Bill Barr, the Attorney General, like Mike Pence, the Vice President?
I think that the real resistance did not come from them. I would question that. I think it came from the bureaucracy. And it's not their place to question.
Can you give me an example or two?
Well, I mean, the first impeachment came from Vindman, was a career official. He was not a political appointee. We have to get career officials out of the policy-making power. We need technical advice, we need scientific advice, but we cannot have a bureaucracy which is making policy.
Can I just ask a question? The policy was actually made by the Congress, who had allocated the funds to Ukraine. This isn't about a national security staffer, and this was about the President of the United States redirecting congressionally appropriated funds to Ukraine.
Yes, 700, close to $1 billion went to Ukraine under Trump. Nobody talks about that, though. They just talk about what, Democrats are doing now, but Trump was doing the same thing back then.
Ukraine. So why is that about the deep state?
Actually, I would like to see the executive not as powerful. I like to see the legislature have more power than it has right now.
Do you have another example of where the deep state thwarted Donald Trump rather than prominent conservatives in his administration, as Amanda suggested?
Yeah, I mean, let me think about it. But
think about it.
Many instances where the real push came from the deep state, from the permanent. I don't really.
I understand you're saying that, and you're going to think of another example for me. In the meantime, I want to move on.
What?
In 1974, on the original firing line, William F. Buckley Jr. invited his brother, then Senator James Buckley, to discuss the future of American conservatism in the aftermath of President Nixon's resignation. Take a look.
First of all, I would say that the Watergate episode and others leading up to it, in very real senses, I think illustrate the fundamental conservative principle, and that is if you concentrate enough power, especially discretionary or arbitrary power in any one place, at some point or another, it's going to be abused. And of course, there was nothing, this has been happening over the years.
Quick reaction, Amanda.
The thing that makes me sad that's happening in the Republican Party now is that I don't think they've learned the lessons of how abuse of power, conspiratorial thinking, weaponizing the Department of Justice, and things like that, as we started the conversation, led to disastrous results, but just was a stain on the Republican Party for so long that had to be reclaimed. And finally, we got to those places, and now it seems like we want to go back and make the same mistakes.
Okay, I'd like to take some student questions now. Please introduce yourself and tell us your question.
My name is Julian Rocha. I'm a senior majoring in geography and global studies here at Hofstra. And my question is, if Donald Trump were to lose the election or be disqualified for any reason, do Do you think the future of the Republican Party lies with his proteges, such as Marjorie Taylor Greene, or with more, I guess, independent Republicans, such as Glenn Youngkin?
I mean, I wish it were with someone like a Brian Kemp or Larry Hogan and Nikki Haley. I would love to see her be the first female president, but sadly, I don't think that's the case.
Mike, Amanda gave some examples of people that she would like to see lead the Republican Party in a post-Trump era. Who do you like?
There's many. I agree with some of the names you mentioned, Amanda. I like DeSantis. I think that Tim Scott is a prominent Republican.
So who do you think leads the party in a post?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, he doesn't know. He likes Tim Scott, but doesn't know if Tim Scott can lead the party. You know why? Because the party doesn't back Tim Scott. He likes DeSantis because DeSantis is an acolyte of Trump. Is the party going to get behind DeSantis? I don't think so. This is the problem with the right. They don't really have a fundamental vision. That's why last week we did a whole entire analysis of the 2028 lineup of what it could potentially look like for Democrats. With Republicans, you don't have that. And we said that on our stream. Myself, Nagone 11, Renaissance Man, and Citizen Lou. We came to the same conclusion that you're seeing right now on screen. Republicans don't have an answer for 2028 because they don't have an answer for 2024 because they took their L's in 2020 and 2022, and they took their L in 2020 in 2018 as well. This is the fundamental problem. You can't solve this issue by throwing more Trump at it. It doesn't work. Like Amanda Carpenter is saying, this overreach of power is not sustainable in the long term. This is very short term. If the numbers stay the same from 2024 to 2028 to 2032, Democrats could have the whole entire White House to themselves for the next 3 election cycles. That's a big problem for Republicans because they'll never get it back at this point.
We're talking about 4 years from now. That's an impossible question to answer.
Then let's go to another student.
I am Alex Webb. I am a junior journalism student here at Hofstra. And my question for you is, do you think these polarized politics as they exist today are something that's going to last in a post-Trump America?
It's true that the two sides are like this. They used to be like this. The most left-wing Republican was to the left of the most conservative Democrat. That's no longer the case. They're like this now. There's no Venn diagram. And that is a fact. I don't know how we get back this. I think conservatives are ready, if they ever get power back, to take back the culture, to their things that have become norms that should not have been norms 10 years ago. That have become norms over the last 10 years. I think we're going to remain polarized. I'm sorry.
You're not hopeful.
Yeah, I'm not hopeful. And I don't think that we should be at a kumbaya moment right now. I think that we need to solve some issues about where the country should go.
Amanda.
I mean, I guess to be honest with you, Margaret, I have a hard time envisioning what a post-Trump Republican Party looks like. You know, I'm pretty committed conservative. I'm not welcome. No one is asking for my vote when I talk about how we need to limit executive power. What they say to conservatives like me, what Donald Trump says to someone like Nikki Haley, you are barred. Get out.
And that's the way the party's being run now. Actual conservatives are not welcome in the party, and Republicans in name only pretty much have controlled the party for the last couple election cycles. This is the, this is the end result of what happens when you allow grifters to take over the party. And a lot of Black men have lined themselves up to be a part of that party because that they identify with what's going on in the party, which is the chaos and grifting that's going on. And it's pretty lucrative if you can make a quick buck off of it. But that's the way they see it. And that's why they don't like Democrats for the most part, because Democrats are actually passing legislation and getting things done on their side, where on this side, like she just identified, and like we've been talking about for the last 2, 3, 4 years, nothing has been going on the Republican side at all. There has been no meaningful legislation. There has been no big ideas. There has been nothing going on. They have controlled the White House. They have controlled the upper and lower chambers, and they have not passed any meaningful legislation. That is the future of the party. Nothing getting done, the do nothing party, complete obstruction, and nobody wants to actually admit that that party is blighted. I've said this many times before. We've covered this many times before, that the party has no place to go.
I guess we'll go.
That's not what I said to you, man.
No, you don't.
Okay.
I know. You want to run for president?
This is see, we feel the love, and this is where actually we actually do have the ability to model having civil discourse and believing that that is our civic responsibility. Mike Gonzalez, Amanda Carpenter, thank you very much for coming here to discuss your vision and your interpretation of what a Trump 2.0 administration would look like. And to the students of Hofstra University, thank you for joining us.
Here's another interesting aspect of this, right? They're at a university. These are the next generation of voters, okay? These are most likely Generation Zs on the come up, if not late millennials. What you have are students, the next generation of voters, looking at all of this, and they're saying, hey, I probably don't want to vote for these guys over there. How do you bring in new bodies into the party? You don't have any new ideas, no big ideas, not really welcoming to actual conservatives, hostile towards what you consider to be liberal or leftist. In what capacity can you expand the party? You really can't. And the reason why you can't is primarily because you don't have an actual party. It is a criminal syndicate governed by a person who largely is a Republican in name only and a grifter. So what are we talking about here? The party is basically run like the manosphere. Very loose, overreach of powers, not sharing people's content and then putting words in people's mouths and things that they didn't say. And, there's a whole lot of rigmarole that goes on. And so what I'm saying here is you have a whole entire audience of next generation voters that are going to be voting in November. Those people in that audience are not going to vote Republican. Trump does not have the numbers. There's no way that he can ever usurp Biden out of his position if those people that are in the audience are going to go to the ballots in November. That is impossible. So that's enough of that. Link is in the chat. I would like anybody who wants to defend the Tangerine Tyrant or the Republican Party at this point, come up on the panel. Link is in the chat. It's pinned to the top. Shout out to the people in the chat. What's going on, Chaos Rain? Yeah, the thing here is this. I'm not saying who you should vote for and who you shouldn't vote for, but man, at the very least, come with some factual information and some historical grounding before you come on to talk about we were wrong, right? You had folks going live last night over in the Coliseum talking about how, the brain trust is wrong. We're always wrong. We're always getting it wrong. Well, that's funny because you got conservatives on the panel right now who are saying the same exact thing that we just said last week and we've been saying for the last 3 or 4 years. No meaningful legislation, overreach of powers, completely dysfunctional caucuses. Okay? Control of the White House, control of the upper and lower chambers, and still nothing was done. No meaningful legislation, $8.7 trillion added to the debt, and nothing was done. Nothing substantial was done. Now, when someone says, brothers, man, we did well under DJT. We did well under the previous administration. Really? Did you? Did you really? How do you explain all those people exiting the party? They didn't do well themselves. Some of them have completely left politics. Okay? A whole lot of folks in this space have put a lot of their credibility on the line by aligning themselves up with folks on the other side. Yeah, Ayo. Ayo says Trump became head of the RNC and removed all minority outreach programs. Yeah, how are you going to expand the party? How are you going to do that? You don't have the numbers. It doesn't make any sense. And so this is where we are right now. I think that some folks in the manosphere on the wrong side of history, a lot of people want to question the credibility of the Black Brain Trust. The links stay in the chat and them folks never pull up, but they go live at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning talking about us. But it's like, don't take our, don't misquote us. We were pretty straightforward in what we were saying in our previous stream. You don't have to put words in our mouths in order to have commentary for yourself. You could do that on other panels, but you can't do that over here. You'll never get away with that over here. What's going on, Chaos Ring?
Oh, what's good? Might be, did you get my email yesterday?
I got it. Yeah, when I woke up. What's going on?
Okay. So they're defending Trump even to the point where they've been asked some serious questions of what is the agenda, and they still can't give a clear answer. And mind you, I'm like, I watched a good part. I only missed 9 minutes of stream, but it seemed to me that there's not really no answers. Possibly they said, "Just put me in office and let me do what I gotta do," like everything else.
Well, what do you think Trump 2.0 would bring to the White House this time, will bring to the country for that matter?
Personally, I think Trump's for himself. Whatever he did in the last time in his first 4 years, probably for his own good. I don't see him doing much personally. I mean, to be honest with you, because I've been hearing what they said, what things he did good. I still have not seen it personally. I mean, that's just me personally, And mind you, I'm more in the middle. I don't really pick sides until when it's time to really. I look at what's there and then pick a side. So.
Oh, so you wait until November to pick a side?
I mean, it's somewhat. Usually, ahead of time, I see what's going on first, and then make a decision.
Well, the thing here is, I think your choice is your personal prerogative. But the problem with the manosphere, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a part of the manosphere, but so I'm not excluding myself. But we have to exclude the Black Brain Trust because we've been pretty much spot on with all of our analysis. We don't just do chatter. We provide. We provide factual Chaos. You got a lot of feedback.
Oh, let me mute myself. Sorry.
Yeah, we provide enough context with some critical analysis in order to formulate the positions that we have. And what's been happening in the manosphere the last few years is, in fact, since Trump has come into office, has been that it has created a divide with in between Black men, primarily because it exposed a lot of Black men on how little they know about politics, the lack of political literacy, and the cult of personality that is being pursued when it comes to politics. And there's no real structure because there's a lack of structure in the manosphere. It's hard for them to organize, and because of the lack of organization, it creates a lot of chaos. No pun intended to you, Chaos Ring. I'm just making a point. I'm just making a point that it's very difficult to get anything done when you don't have any organization, you have no structure, and you have no literacy on actually how things work. You just heard 2 conservatives on screen highlighting that one conservative can't see the future of the party. The other conservative is saying they pushed her out of the party. How do you actually govern if you can't get consensus within the party? It doesn't make any sense. And you have a lot of Black men who are fiending to be on that side of the fence because they identify what's going on in the Republican Party today in the same way that the manosphere is run today. Complete chaos, no structure, no organization, no action being taken, lack of literacy, unwilling to read, unwilling to engage. That's the reality of the manosphere today. That's the reality of the Republican Party today. And you have a lot of black men who have outsourced all of their political representation to grifters and rhinos, and now they want to subcontract their masculinity, their masculine representation to a bunch of white men in a predominantly black space. You can't make any of this up.
Oh, damn, that's a lot. You know, because when I came across a lot of you gentlemen back in late 2018, and at the time Trump was in office at that time, that I did not know even years ago when how organized, let's say, the Black Master was, up until the point when I came across 6 years ago, that it started to fracture year by year. And a lot of people even ask where the direction should we go. And a lot of dudes won't keep real you might be, a lot of them here just to make money. I mean, as simple as that. I mean, because if you're not organized to really for the betterment of black men, then what's the other option you're doing? Then you're here just to make money. And that's fine. But the problem is you cannot complain about the political process or system if, like you said, you're not even well read. I had MOT on my channel and I asked him a very crucial question as the stream winds down. What advice he would give for people that's younger now, that's coming up. Just as he showed there, those young people that are like, what, 20 years old? In that, I'm sitting down asking a question. They are the future that's going to push the country forward. So what education they will need to move forward if they got to make a decision, if they're going to fall aside or pick a side. Do you get me, Mike V?
Yeah.
How they should go about it properly. And that's the one thing MOT laid out last night. And what you showed today, that's a sure bet that the people that's watching that's a part of that, they're the future voting blocks. They need guidance. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're right. That, those people in, let me share my screen because maybe people don't even know what we're talking about here. These people in the audience right here will be going to the ballot in November. And what you just heard from those two conservatives, and they speak for many conservatives, one doesn't see the future of the party, any leadership. He likes Tim Scott, doesn't see him as a leader. Likes DeSantis, he's a complete acolyte of Trump, who he himself has pushed out most of the actual legacy conservatives. What kind of party is that? It's not a party. It's a syndicate. It's a criminal syndicate. Breaking the laws to stop black people from voting, gerrymandering districts, calling for recounts and stopping people from voting at the ballot, attacking poll workers. This has never happened before, at least not in our lifetime. And so I think a lot of black men are attracted to this. They like the idea of a non-democratic society. Fascism, for the lack of a better description. And so what could you possibly offer, to younger black males like you were bringing up? What would they be looking forward to? Nothing is getting done.
And if things are not getting done, that means someone else is making the direction and take a position what things should be get done. And once they make the bigger decisions, people can't complain at the end of the day. Am I right, Mike V? Since nothing getting done, so someone's had to pull the strings to make the decision for the general population, correct?
Absolutely.
So really truly, and I'm not knocking people what they do if they want to participate in the political process or not, but don't sit and complain of the outcomes. Personally, I think with the Black Brain Trust, they give enough information, education for you to make the conscious decision. And not like financial advice, but this is like dealing with political suggestions and what the information lay out there. You decide where you should go and shift to have an understanding. I mean, you do the bigger work, and everybody else got to do somewhat the small work to make their own conclusions and do further research. I think one of the issue is, and this is just me, is that I think there has to be a point where people got to be educated properly on how the process really goes. Like, I don't know if there has to be class or something, but there has to be some form of education, in my opinion. This is just me. And people can question this. Look, I think if you just leave it to people's device, a lot of people are not going to waste the time to be educated in it. They're just going to sit there and say and be fault for everything from the media and all stuff, and that's it. I said there should be some that people have to learn, like everything else, to know how the political process really work. In my opinion, this is just me. I don't know if you want to, argue with this with me, Mike, but I think that's how things should go moving forward.
No, I mean, they had 4 years to do all of this, Chaos. We've been having these conversations, as far as I know, since at least 2019, at the very least. And I think that it shouldn't take you a bachelor's degree to have a basic understanding of civics and government. When I was on Art Newstall stream last week, I was shouted down on the legislation that Biden had passed. I never told anybody to vote for Biden. The question was, what meaningful legislation has Biden passed? I said the Chips and Science Act. And people scoffed at me. In fact, people tried to overtalk me as if I didn't know what I was talking about, and what I was talking about was not relevant to Black males. Well, the Chips and Science Act, let me bring it up.
Bring it up. Let's see what that is. And that sounds like STEM or technology, but let's see what it is. Go ahead.
No, it is. Let me just bring it up really quickly. All right, let me share my screen. Let me know you can see my screen.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. This is from the Commerce of Government, okay? Secretary of Commerce. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo hosts launch of HBCU CHIPS Network to build a skilled and diverse workforce in producing semiconductors. This is the meaningful legislation that I was referring to, okay? Now here, I was laughed at. I was scoffed. I was overtalked. Well, how does this benefit Black men? My response is, don't Black men attend HBCUs? Isn't there a place called Morehouse? Isn't there a place called NC North Carolina A&T, that graduates a lot of Black men who going into tech? How is this not beneficial? Let's read it real quickly. Coinciding with Black History Month, Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo hosted the launch of the HBCU CHIPS Network yesterday, a collaboration between several historically Black colleges and universities and the Georgia Institute of Technology. This collaboration will help coordinate the resources of these colleges and universities and build a skilled and diverse workforce in producing chips, also known as semiconductors. Chips are critical in powering our consumer electronics, automobiles, data centers, critical infrastructure, and virtually all military systems, okay? 2 years ago, President Biden signed the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act, a historic $50 billion funding opportunity to revitalize America's domestic semiconductor industry and create hundreds of thousands of good jobs. Through the Commerce Department's Chips Up for America program, recipients of this funding must demonstrate how their project will advance the nation's economic security alongside worker and community investments, including opportunities for small businesses and disadvantaged communities. They're talking about Black people. Okay. In 2023, Secretary Raimondo called on colleges and universities to triple the number of graduates in semiconductor-related fields. However, a labor shortage remains in critical industry. Today's industry estimates show there will be a shortage of 300,000 engineers, 90,000 technical workers by 2030. This was the legislation I brought up on Art's panel, okay? And what happened was people pushed back and said, well, anybody could have done that. Trump could have done that. Well, Trump didn't pass any meaningful legislation. That's the whole purpose of this conversation. But what you have in the manosphere is an unwillingness to actually acknowledge factual information. Anything that contradicts their personal views has largely been pushed to the side in order to propose more opinionated ideas. This is not my opinion, okay? This is the facts. You asked for the facts, I gave you the facts. You don't want me to read it? Go read it yourself. It's not the responsibility of Mike V or the Black Brain Trust to do the research for you, to give you information so you can argue with us about something that we never said in the first place, okay? When Trump was in office, nothing like this existed. Today, it does exist. Am I saying you should go vote for Biden? No. But we're going to talk facts here. These are the facts. If you're sending your son to an HBCU, there's a high probability if he enrolls in STEM, this is going to be a part of the curriculum. Okay? It's not that difficult to understand here. Big ideas, meaningful legislation, that's how you run a society. That's how you run your economy. Now, the pushback was Black boys read at a third grade level, okay? That they won't benefit from this program. It's the most bombastic ideas I've ever heard of, response I've ever heard of. But this is what you get. So with that being said, what's your take on what I just read?
I mean, it says it right there, and this has only been almost over a month now when this article came out. But like I said, if it's not to their liking, and the Black man will reveal like yourself this information, I think they're looking for something more, in their opinion, to, how can I say it? They said, I see it, I hear you, but they think it's not enough. And I said, what more can you need? I mean, certain administration only could do so much. I mean, if you're not looking for this information, you should be. Come on, go ahead.
Well, the reality is, Chaos, is that they weren't getting this in the last administration, right? This never existed. In fact, Black people have been woefully underrepresented in the semiconductor industry. This is the first step. This isn't a, moonshot. This is a first step. This is how you get people involved. Once you get people involved, once you get the research and development dollars into your districts and into your areas, then that's the game changer. Because now you can start participating in the very emerging industries that's going to take place over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. It takes 10 years to build a scientist, okay, or at least to create one. And so the idea that, Black men are not going to benefit because there are more Black women in HBCUs than there are Black men, that makes no sense to me. First, it's we need more Black men in college, and then when Black men are going to college, you argue against the legislation that would benefit them from being in college. Makes no sense to me.
I mean, you have the benefit at the end of the day, if black men, especially going to be in college, that how can we utilize what's in the university, especially HBCU, if people are attending HBCUs, that it has to benefit you as a man. You go in there, you do your 4 years, you come out with something. Now, if there are certain parameters that's blocking you to move forward, if you get these degrees, then that's a problem. And this right here is one step, especially when we're talking about chips. You know how much computers and all that stuff that costs, that is needed, that most of the things we manufacture, we don't build no more, that people are aware of, that because that you give that to a third party overseas, and that money could go better to people in the United States, especially things like chips. And last time I checked, if you know, this might be because you're in the tech field, they said that certain countries are very, very skeptical having other people build chips for them because they could put things, do things that they're not aware because you did not manufacture it. So there's another what do you call it? Something to do with interests in regards to the protection of the country.
It's national. They consider it to be a national security interest. But the thing here is, you live in a globalized economy where everybody is connected, interconnected with each other, and so at some point you're gonna have to, deal with other nation states and other groups of people. That's just the reality of a global economy.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
And so I think the problem here is that Black people have been woefully underrepresented in these areas in America. And so you're not going to spin up a semiconductor factory in let's say Washington, D.C. or something like that. You're not going to put it in a predominantly Black neighborhood. It's just not feasible. Semiconductor fabrication sites need a lot of water. Most Black communities don't have a whole lot of water to be sparing in the first place. But
so the water, the question right now, the water we drink, the question right now in the Black community, we're not going there.
well, what it allows you to do is to be involved in the research and development process of how semiconductors work, how semiconductors can be applied from an application standpoint, and then you can actually pivot into different areas. Apple does not necessarily create their own chips. They design their chips, but somebody else makes it for them. The same thing could be done in the Black community where you have research and development, innovation labs in Black communities that can benefit from federal and state funding for research and development purposes, and allows Black people to be involved in the design process. And NVIDIA now has, well, they used to have DEI programs now. Now all that's gone because a bunch of right-wing yo-yos decided that they were going to disrupt that whole entire process to stop Black people from being a part of it. When they talk about getting rid of DEI, they're really just talking about getting rid of Black people from democratic workspaces, which is what DEI creates, democratic workspaces. So the point that I'm making here is that I think in the manosphere, you don't need a political science degree to understand what you're seeing on screen. You don't need a political science degree to understand what these folks on this panel are talking about. It doesn't require that. It requires basic fundamental comprehension. Do these people have anything beneficial for Black men specifically, and Black people in generally speaking? Absolutely not. They don't even know what the future of the party is going to look like because they don't even, know if they even have a party to begin with. And so the idea here that I'm proposing isn't so much about you need to be, voting for Biden. You have to look at what policies are on the table. For all the numbers guys and policy guys who live in the Beltway, they don't seem to have this conversation at all. You don't believe me? Go listen to the Coliseum.
If it's still the old Coliseums, but
the new Coliseum, Coliseum, that's not the conversation that they're having. The only people in the space who have been largely having this conversation has been the Black Brain Trust, and we're being told that our content is like watching paint dry while they sit around worrying about who Fannie Willis slept with. I'm talking about meaningful legislation that's going to benefit Black men in the long run. I don't go to a HBCU, so I don't benefit from this. But somebody else's son is going to benefit from this. Somebody else's daughter is going to benefit from this, right? And so that's the whole purpose of what we're doing here, is to disseminate the information so that you can actually make critical decisions in November and beyond. But you have folks who are arguing against this and trying to take our words out of context, especially me. But when the links stay dropped, folks never come up. Oh, I don't want to sit through 2 hours of your boringness. Really? This stream is only an hour long.
I mean, most of the streams that you do mostly are hour and 90 minutes. I mean, even if it was, let's go there, it was 2 hours. Most people, let's be honest, and I don't want to hear this. A lot of people are not going to consume 90 or even, 120-minute content anyway. So when they talk about it's too boring, let's be honest. Most people can't have the attention span, Mike V, to watch long content. So when I hear this word is boring, no. You are bored watching longer content, but someone else that needs this have no problem. And the problem, and I'm not gonna go with talk about TikTok because it's not based on the stream, that all these other applications have watered down and limit the attention span of a lot of people badly. Usually, if you remember back in the early days of YouTube, people used to do like at most 10 to 15, maybe 20-minute videos. Yep. Now we find that people can't even sit down and watch that. And I'm convinced that this is just me, that they've been conditioned to see things at a fraction and not see the whole picture. You cannot consume or learn anything in under a minute. I'm sorry, that's impossible. You can't get no rationale for a soundbite for under a minute or a clip. That's not logic. But they condition people that are stupid that fall for this, that you've been groomed, conditioned to watch short content and not understand the real context of what it is, because you dumb yourself down. Can you agree with me on this, Mike V?
Absolutely, and I think that'll be the last comment. Thank you for coming up, Chaos.
No, one thing I want to ask you. This is very important. This came to mind. Mm-hmm. Now that Family Mill, you mentioned she's staying on the case.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked MOT this. I want to ask your opinion. Do you think any bills or legislation is going to put forth after this, since they're going to use her as an example, since she went for this trial?
Say that one more time.
I'm gonna say it's like, like every trial that goes through America, they always re-look at and said this case went by, that they're gonna make some bills or laws put in place. after every trial is gone through, in regards to conduct or, just in general?
Well, I mean, the laws already exist. That's why they're able to prosecute them under these charges. So the laws already exist. They don't really need to add anything. They need to enforce it. What the last president did was he called the Secretary of State of Georgia and asked for 11,780 votes. Go find it for me. He wanted to overturn.
I remember that.
He wanted to overturn the election. By law, he is disrupting the electoral process. That's what they're charging him with. And you have people in this space who are like, they have to prove it. What are you talking about? He's on record. And so to answer your question, to the whole Fannie Willis thing, a lot of these folks who thought that Fannie Willis was going to be kicked off of the case are wrong. Okay. She's still on the case. Trump's still going to get prosecuted. All the rest of the, people on that case, the 17 other people are going to be prosecuted as well. The 3 others already took plea bargains. That means that the case is very legitimate, that those charges are very legitimate against them. You don't take a plea bargain unless you think that those charges are real. So
Go finish. Kyle, we're gonna have to go finish.
Yeah, that's my last thoughts, man. Thank you.
Yeah, but yeah. And once you take a plea bargain, that means you're trying to save your own butt. And that's where it becomes a problem for Donald Trump. So right now, this is going to run for the rest of the year. I'll be surprised how the outcome's going to turn with all this. This is going to be a very weird year, Mike V, personally, and I keep track of it, but I think this is a great distraction. I tell people many times, move forward, you're going to have to understand the political process. You get me?
This will determine the future of the manosphere as we know it today.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Most of it. All right. I'm going to let you go. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you. And thank you to everyone else who have joined the stream. Please hit the like button on the way out, share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates.